Marco Castaldi is Associate Professor in Chemical Engineering Department at the City College of New York, City University of New York. Prior to joining CCNY, he was Associate Professor at Columbia University's Earth and Environmental Engineering Department. Professor Castaldi has approximately 50 peer-reviewed research articles, 32 peer-reviewed conference papers, 3 book chapters, and 11 patents. Some of his research findings have been covered by the New York Times, The Observer, CNN, and other trade publications. So welcome, Marco Castaldi.
Thank you for the invitation and the introduction. If I just press the button, the slides go down? Okay. So there's a couple of themes, and in my sort of 10 minutes here, I just want to touch upon them and give you a little bit of perspective on some of the work we're doing at the Earth Engineering Center over at the CCNY. You know, the themes that came up today obviously are research, and this is a big one. And I think it touches upon and crosses things like collaboration. And in collaboration, what's important are the needs and then setting of the goals of what will be done with the research. There's, of course, education, and that education spans students, sort of next generation practitioners, as well as the public and what the public information needs to be. We're focused here in waste as a resource, but there's also information that comes through in this type of research that gets done and how it gets disseminated. So the research is not only, of course, technology assessments, but it's also some of the things I think that we've heard, you know, public planning and policy, but it's also the issuance of independent reports and then presentations and sort of dissemination of that information. So I just very briefly talk about the City University of New York. I know these slides are being given to the participants, so it just sort of introduces the university. We have a number of campuses all around New York City. City College is one campus of City University, and we're known for a number of prominent graduates and type of research that gets done. The organization that I'm associated with, of course, are the university and the college campus, but we have a center called the Earth Engineering Center. And I have sort of the mission statement here. But in general, what we strive to do, and I think we have been doing it fairly well because we get positive feedback and no one has actually thrown us out of a room yet. But it basically intersects industry, academia, importantly, but also brings in what I would consider the public sector. And that public sector could be public community, but it could also be decision makers, municipalities, and so on. So I don't want to go across all of the different things that we have done. We do technical assessments. There are companies that are interested in understanding their technology, and we would do a technical due diligence. If it's a field unit, would go out there and do it. But sometimes we could do experiments in the lab and sort of test things out. Will this material gasify well? Will this material render a product properly? And that's sort of what I would consider a cheap way, because the labor is, you know, working with students, the labor is very cheap, but it's a very good connection because it also gets students and next generation practitioners interested in something like this, that if that technology were to take off, there are people that maybe are informed about it. But in addition, what we do, and a big part of designing and executing in a research environment, is getting the information out in the proper way, and that's through peer-reviewed technical papers, but it's also through, which I'll show you very briefly, different venues of presentations and other types of media that can sort of help relate the science and the engineering to the public. And I can honestly say that when we relate it to the public, or at least when I relate it to the public, I'm well coached because as engineers, you know, at least I don't do a very good job in that. But here are just some of the things that show the types of work that we do and what it spans across. But I want to speak about presentations because this is important. You know, we've done things all the way from venues like this, a workshop, a technical workshop that you're trying to develop ideas and concepts to go forward, all the way to communicating to international audiences. In the US, we have the State Department where they bring people to sort of just understand what's been going on. Last year, I was very happy to be part of this symposia, and this year it's great to see that it is even bigger. And so, you know, it's these types of events that get the information out and I think get the interest going. But we also do something in Portland, Oregon, that was very interesting. Was in an old movie house. They have what they call Nerd Night. You know, as an engineer, this is what draws engineers there. It was great. But there was, you know, they sell beer, and the public community comes out, and they hear somebody speak about a very pertinent topic. In this regard, it was waste to energy. You know, what can your garbage do for us? And then, you know, it's kind of an open mic night, and when you have a bunch of people from the West Coast with some beer talking to a person in New York City, after he's given a presentation that they may not be happy to hear, the conversation gets interesting. But the point is to kind of get the information out and get it out on a very technical level. And then again, importantly, are the publications. And these publications come in the forms of presentations, come in the forms of just reports and white papers, but importantly, it comes in what's considered peer-reviewed articles that experts around the world have reviewed and looked at and sort of have sanctioned that, yes, this is good sound science, good sound results, it adds new knowledge to the field, and this is what can be then utilized by not only industry, but also municipalities and decision makers to say, here is why we're basing our decisions on certain things. So I just put up here again, I know you can't read this, but I know this will be disseminated to just give you an idea of some of the publications and things that come out. But I just want to give you an example of one that was very, very pertinent in a study that we have done recently and resulted in what I consider almost maybe a very important outcome. One research example that did not directly focus on technology, that did not, you know, look at experiments and so on, but did an assessment of what to do with spent baghouse filter bags after they've captured the fly ash. How should they be treated? And so the current practice, and of course this was done for the waste to energy industry in the United States. Now this was not sanctioned by the waste to energy industry. This was supported and sanctioned by the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, because the current practice was to take the fabric filter bag after it had been spent and needed to be disposed of or replaced, was to bring it back into the waste bin and then sent through the boiler to be combusted. One of the options that was presented to the industry was that fabric filter bag that has the residual fly ash on it should be contained in certain types of plastic containers, put on trucks and shipped to a hazardous landfill. And so from an academic standpoint, the natural question arose, which has a bigger environmental impact, doing what's being done now or this possible option of going to a hazardous landfill. And I should say some waste energy facilities do send them to hazardous landfills. In my very short time, I can't go through it, but what we had done was a very rigorous, detailed material and energy balance. And we looked at the emissions of course, all types of things, but maybe say the hazardous ones here. And what we were able to show that if you took these fabric filter bags and sent them back through the combustor, that you would have an emissions change of about what's shown there, from 0.15% to 0.02%. And we also overlaid this, a health risk assessment, to show what that might mean in terms of mortality, so on and so forth, which I'm not going to show here. But what we did then was put this in perspective to say that a 0.15% increase in cadmium emissions requires the measurement sensitivity to resolve between 2.1900 and 2.1903 micrograms per nanometer cubed. So this is the technical information. And when we went through the Code of Federal Regulations, which the EPA mandates that you have to use this code of federal regulations to use these types of emissions monitoring. What we found, and you can see down here, is that that increase in emissions that we calculated based on, the engineering principles that we know, are 100 times lower than the actual detection sensitivity of the EPA's mandated measurement systems. So question number one is, can you even measure it? Question number two then is, now that we can calculate it, what does that mean for life cycle assessment, environmental impacts and so on based on a health assessment? Turns out what we found based really on the, I have one more minute, based on the health impact was that the current practice of sending it through the boiler is really the preferred method. So what we did was we sent this to the EPA for consideration. It was not an opinion, and the EPA issued a letter in a ruling, and the ruling basically, you could read it, this is all public knowledge, but said the burning of the baghouse filters is not expected to significantly impact emissions from the combustor. So this was a technical aspect. Some WTE facilities still prefer to send it to the landfill, and others say this is great, we can still do what we do. But in my 10 minutes, I just wanted to present to you what I consider a one-off type of study that was done, that was commissioned and sanctioned by the American Society of Mechanical Engineers to look at, in a very technical way, what would be the environmental impacts of such a change in policy. So with that time, thank you for the invitation, and I'll be answering any questions later.
Jorgen Hokal is the project director of international projects for Ramboll Engineering. He has 40 years experience in waste management, so please welcome Jorgen.
Thank you, John. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to come here today. I have 9 minutes to tell the story about the rest of the world, so I'll do my best. Ramboll is a consulting company. We are based in Denmark. From our engineering perspective, we have been working on waste management here in North America for the last 10 years. We have a small office here in the neighbor town of Gulf, dealing mainly with district heating systems. I'll come back to district heating later. In Europe, we discuss, as I have heard today here, that circular economy, recycling, make the best out of the waste, take it out of the stream, return it back, products back, materials back. But there's a big difference between this situation here in Europe and what I've heard today, because in Europe we have no landfill. In the north of the Alps, in Western Europe, all waste which are not recyclable goes to energy recovery. That means we have a zero waste society in the main part of Europe. And it has been a great success. And it's not only because we have lack of land space. If we look into the Scandinavian countries like Norway and Sweden, they have a huge amount of land. So that's not the reason. The reason is that we want to get the best out of the waste, and that has been our way of moving that way. How have we been able to do it? It's based on two principles: a landfill ban, which were introduced in most of the countries in the 90s, and landfill tax. I don't think tax is such a great issue in Canada, but in US they don't like taxes, but we like taxes if they can drive waste out of landfills. So the landfill ban and the landfill tax is a very effective instrument. During the last years, it has been the reason why England has been able to drive to a big expansion of all techniques, increasing recycling MRFs, new technologies, gasification and waste-to-energy facilities. The landfill tax in UK is now close to 200 Canadian dollars. It's really an effective measure, to avoid building mountains of waste here just 3 kilometers from where we are, as we have heard today. So there's a difference in the circular economy that we have no landfill, so it should be taken away on this slide. I have tried to reduce my impact on CO2 emission on the travel here to Toronto, because tomorrow I'll go down to Palm Beach, Florida, where the authority will inaugurate a new huge waste-to-energy facility, which will take 1 million tons a year. It's the first total modern new facility in the United States. And as we have heard, it can take as much waste as the waste from Toronto City. So it's a good example. It has been operating now for 3 months, and the grand opening will be on this this Friday. Why I'm showing you this little simple slide? It's because it shows that district heating is an important way of increasing the efficiency of a waste-to-energy facility, because everybody knows you can produce electricity, but in countries like Canada, there's also a good opportunity to use the heat, as we do in Europe, in Scandinavia, and Germany. It normally doubles the income from sale of energy, and that means it gives also a reduction of greenhouse gases from producing energy by burning fossil fuel, or what's the alternative. But as this slide shows, it's quite detailed, a smart city, and it shows very much the situation we have in my country, in Denmark, where we combine wind turbines, we have anaerobic digestion of sludge, that's the yellow stream. We have electricity production, certainly that's easy, that's the red one. We have heat, that is the green one, this for district heating. In Copenhagen, as in many Scandinavian countries, the whole city, we have district heating running 50 kilometers from the center out to the outskirts of Copenhagen, increasing the efficiency as I have shown. In other countries, district cooling, that's the blue one, is an alternative for using the surplus steam. So there's a great opportunity to increase efficiency and thereby certainly also reducing cost. Now I will look into another smart country. It is Singapore. Singapore is an island, has 5.5 million inhabitants, and they have just decided to implement a new system for total management of water and waste in the country. So from the center of the city out to the west, 30 kilometers, they are implementing a new combined facility, which I will say a few words about. The idea is to combine the future waste-to-energy facilities and waste treatment facilities, recycling facilities, with a future wastewater treatment plant, which will serve the half of the country. So the idea of this project we have been working on for 1 year, it is to combine all the synergies between waste treatment, waste handling, and wastewater treatment. Even in Singapore, they lack drinking water, so they also produce new water out of sewage water. Some of the synergies are obvious. Sewage sludge is going to the waste to incineration, where we use the steam for electricity production. But the waste incineration facility is combined with a facility to take in separate collected food waste, and the food waste is transported to the digesters of the the wastewater treatment plant, the co-digested wastewater sludge and food waste is used back again to improve the efficiency of the waste incineration plants. So there's the good the idea behind this system is that it is possible to take care of both water and waste in an efficient way, and to use all the possibilities of co-location of the facilities. My final slide, say a few words about how we work on waste and waste management in total. We work internationally in my company and in the whole world together with ISWA, International Solid Waste Association. The North American branch of ISWA is SWANA. And at the moment, ISWA is performing a task force on resource management with participation of the different working groups, the working group on recycling, the working group of biological treatment, energy recovery, and UNEP is also involved. The idea is to try to together to develop and understand the best benefits of waste management working together. ISWA working groups, they are open to every member of ISWA. Members are public authorities, private specialists, academics, now I come to the academics, governmental regulators, and industry. We also, in my company, does research, but mainly through ISWA. We have in ISWA working groups during the last year where I come from the energy recovery working group, carried out research on bottom ash treatment, on fly ash treatment, and on metal recovery. That's one of the very interesting new developments of the facilities. It is that we can take out these metals out of nothing. If you try to burn, to try to get out a very small amount of silver from a discarded mobile phone, it's very, very difficult to pick out. But if you take what comes in with the waste, we can recover a large part of also the precious metals, silver, gold, copper, and zinc, together certainly with ferrous metals and non-ferrous metals. So we are very happy to work together with academics in the working group, in my company. And why are we interested in that? It's because we are interested in having the expertise, the credibility from the and the academic attitude of working. We also recognize that the academics, they provide our future staff. So that's one benefit we can see from working together with academics, that they teach and develop the future staff of our company. So we look forward to further working together with academics also in our company in the working groups. Thank you.
Thank you, Jørgen. Craig Cookson is the Director of Sustainability and Recycling at the American Chemistry Council. He graduated from Wallace E. Carroll Graduate School of Management at Boston College with a Master of Business Administration and Management. His expertise includes sustainability, coalitions, and grassroots organizing. So welcome, Craig, please.
All right.
Thanks, John, and thanks, Krista. Appreciate being here today. Professor Castaldi and I were joking earlier that it's always nice to be able to jump on a plane, fly 55 minutes to an hour, and be part of the international panel. So, because real ego boost. So, thank you. So today I was here to talk about. I struggled a little bit with this presentation because I'm with the American Chemistry Council. We represent the chemical manufacturing industry in the United States. And I'm in the plastics division, so our members are the plastics resin manufacturers. So that'd be like ExxonMobil, Dow Chemical, very similar to Krista at CPIA, Chevron Phillips Chemical, Total, et cetera. So we advocate on issues of plastics to both the markets and to policymakers as well. So as you know, end of life for plastics is a very important issue for how people feel about plastics, and is an area where we spend a lot of time working. So I'm going to try to approach this today about how we use research to further our advocacy and communications goals. So just some quick trends here on waste management in the United States. As you can see, the top bar is landfilling. Obviously, we want that to be lower, but the good thing is that we're landfilling less tons than we were back in 1990. So the trends are going in the right way. Recycling is the blue bar, that's going up. Combustion or energy recovery is the green bar. It's pretty level over the last few years, and composting has been pretty level, but saw a little bit of a bump from 1990 to now. So the trends are all going in pretty much in a decent direction. We'd like to see a little bit more improvement, of course. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time today talking about energy recovery, but I didn't want to skip over recycling. In 10 minutes, I could talk a lot about some of the research initiatives that we have in recycling, but want to kind of focus a little bit more on energy recovery since it's a little bit newer, and with Professor Castaldi on the panel, it made sense. So just a couple of key developments in the U.S. that are of interest, probably pretty similar here. One thing is we do not have extended producer responsibility in the United States, and for the most part, brand owners do not want it either. So we're operating in a different environment. But you'll see that what's really driving demand for recycling is consumers are demanding recycled content in their products. They want to see recycled content in their products, and they want products that can be recycled. The private sector is setting PCR goals, Walmart, Procter & Gamble, and others. There's zero waste initiatives from communities and corporations and municipalities that are helping drive recycling recovery. We have voluntary producer initiatives. ACC has a program called WRAP that is focused specifically on recovering clean polyethylene film, and has a goal of doubling the pounds of polyethylene film recycled by 2020. And then finally, there's a couple new initiatives called the Recycling Partnership and the Closed Loop Fund, which are essentially, again, voluntary producer initiatives where private sector and industry associations are putting in money to help give money to communities to boost their recycling, their community-based recycling programs. Now, of course, there's a lot of challenges. We know, same here, evolving waste stream and the recovery of flexible packaging is really putting a stress on recovery and changing the mix of materials coming into a MRF and the economics. Global energy prices, of course. Here in North America, of course, we're very energy rich right now with both gas and oil and coal, of course, too. So that puts a challenge on recycling. And then the economics, as we mentioned before. So, I'll keep going. So we do a lot of programs on it. We're part of the recycling partnership. I talked about the WRAP program. We have programs on rigids, bottles, a lot of different things on recycling. However, let's talk a little bit about plastics innovations now. We've kind of innovated ourselves into a little bit of a challenging dilemma, and this is where our interest in energy recovery comes from. This is a life cycle comparison of coffee, right? Coffee packaging. Remember the old steel coffee can? My mom was a Maxwell House drinker back in the day. Migrated to a plastic canister. Now most people get it in sort of a flexible coffee packaging. Now, if you look at the life cycle, that plastic brick is about, has only about 25% of the life cycle greenhouse gas emissions of that steel can. But everybody knows that can go in your blue bin and be recycled. But at the end of the day, if the goal is to generate less waste and to reduce life cycle greenhouse gas emissions, the plastic really is the material of choice. Of course, we have a challenge in that, again, as I mentioned, consumers want to be able to throw their packaging into a recycle bin, and the brick cannot be recycled. So this is actually a way that we communicate some information. So as we got into energy recovery, it's, okay, well, first of all, we have to convince policymakers that this is an important resource that we should be going after, that plastics are too valuable to waste. So we worked with Professor Castaldi and Professor Themelis at WTRT and said, okay, what if we capture all our waste and convert it to energy or fuels or whatever, what's the value of that? And so part of what we did was look at, okay, well, what's the energy value of plastics in the waste stream, and found that on average, they average about 15,000 BTUs per pound, which is only a little bit less than natural gas and crude oil. And we're even doing a project right now with Professor Castaldi where we're just trying to make sure that that number is fully accurate. We want to be able to stand before audiences and have confidence in that number, and the data is a little bit all over the place. We usually get it from the Energy Information Administration in the US, but some some of their sources are, need to be sort of corroborated. So we're working with Professor Castaldi on that. So this is kind of how we view the universe of sort of how you manage post-use plastics. Of course, we want to maximize recycling as much as we can for the plastics like the coffee brick that I talked about that you can't recycle. We want to see that go to energy recovery. And energy recovery, of course, for us is a broad bucket, including mass burn, waste energy, engineered solid fuels, gasification, like Christian talked to you about earlier this morning as they're doing in Edmonton, and then pyrolysis or plastics to fuel. And then even in, let's say, something like pyrolysis, there's further segmentation of the types of end products that they're producing. And this is the type of stuff that policymakers and regulators kind of like to see. So a key thing about what we try to do is really communicate that versatility of energy recovery. And it's kind of funny because I'm showing you this is how we sort of simplify everything. And Professor Castaldi and I joke about how we take, 80-page research papers and turn it into a slide like this. But sometimes that's kind of critical to be able to communicate that, look, the waste stream at the end of the day is valuable, and we can make it into a lot of different products, and markets and innovation are out there, and these are the types of things that they're doing with the waste stream. So we need the right policies in place to be able to capture that. I'll stop here just to kind of mention a couple other projects. We are doing a project where we're actually partners with CPIA in Edmonton, looking at how non-recycled plastics kind of affect gasification, both the yields and the process. We're working with Waste Management on an engineered fuel product to replace coal at a cement kiln. I talked about the projects that we're doing with Professor Castaldi. So we have a lot of research going on. And I didn't want to bring a laundry list of sort of research today, but so if folks are interested, either visit our website or send me an email and I can direct you to some of the work we've done. This is kind of one of my favorite ones as well. It kind of gets back to how we communicate this. And again, this is another project that we did with WTERT and Columbia CCNY. And really basically what it says, it just encapsulates the opportunity that if we took all the waste in the United States that's landfilled each year, and instead we generated electricity with it, we could power about 14 million homes. And there's about 120 million homes in the United States, so that's a little over 10%. So that is significant and shows to policymakers, hey, this is actually a valuable energy resource because we put in a context for them. In the lower right, you'll see that if we just took the non-recycled plastics and converted those to fuels through a pyrolysis process, you could produce almost 6 billion gallons of gasoline. And that would be enough to fuel about 9 million cars a year. So again, pretty significant. And then of course, the environmental benefit, which is oftentimes really what's on consumers' mind, is that if we took all this waste, instead of sending it to landfill, put it into some sort of energy recovery process, we'd save about 6,000 acres of open space a year. And I forget, we tried to put it in context of Central Parks. I don't know if you remember that stat off the top of your head, but obviously, the thought of preserving open space is something we all want to see. So finally, and I don't want to come off as sounding preachy or anything here, but offering our perspective on what are some of the building blocks for hopefully having some success. Number one is of course strong research and technical studies. I think you all know that, but I think the key is sort of in the following ones is how you use that research and technical studies. We use it religiously really for communications and outreach. We produce some great educational materials. We love having the confidence to stand by the research that we do with Professor Castaldi and others, and be able to stand by that research, which gives us the confidence to put out good educational materials. And then it also helps us deliver our key messages. What are the key messages that are going to get policymakers and regulators and others, the whole value chain interested in this? Policymaker and regulator outreach, a strategy for that is critical. At the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do. And then finally, we really do need some value chain engagement. I usually have a slide on this, but I think that's really the key thing, and I think it's one of the big challenges that we've been having, we want to put more time into, is I think we're all kind of engaged from the waste and recycling and materials manufacturing sector, but how do we get retailers and brand owners and others so that they're in this, so we're not speculating about what they think, but they're a greater part of these conversations. So it was just my thought. So there's my contact information. I think the slides will be available, so please, if you have any questions, contact me. And thanks again for having me today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Craig. We have a few minutes for questions.
Thank you very much, panel. My question is around the concept of lock-in related to energy to waste. Some of the academic readings I've been doing, looking at energy from waste facilities, primarily incinerators, primarily in Scandinavia, that have been up and running for decades. There's now some criticism because they're over capacity. In other words, they don't have the garbage feedstock for them anymore. And rather than downscaling the facilities, they are looking to import garbage from other jurisdictions in order to keep the energy production going because they need the energy. So there's a kind of tension between producing more garbage in order to get energy. That's the sort of the issue that appears to be what they're dealing with over there. And I wondered if you had any comments to make on that.
Yes, I can see something about it. First of all, you are right. We have had these facilities for very many years, the modern ones during the last 50 years. And they are very well accepted in the community. Actually, in Copenhagen, we are building a new big facility just 3 kilometers from the city center of the old town of Copenhagen, from the Queen's Castle. And she has not complained about the facility. And the story about too little waste and too much capacity, no, it's not correct. The story is that we are helping UK at the moment. They have introduced this landfill tax to avoid having landfills. And since we are in the European community, so we help each other, like the different states in the US and probably also here in Canada. So it's just waste we take from UK at the moment until they will have enough capacity. So the situation is that plants which were planned to be phased out in Scandinavia, we have had to keep them running to help UK. But and in the facilities, total waste management in Scandinavia is run by public authorities, and they are run by politicians, and they will not allow any recyclable waste to be burned. So you can be sure that we only take residual waste which has no recyclable potential, and then we help our neighbors from UK.
Earlier today, Jody was kind enough to offer a perspective on a presentation, and she was very blunt and direct, and she asked about visioning. So this is the visioning part of the exercise today, or at least I expect it to be. So I'm going to spend 5 minutes on, well, no more than 10, on a vision on what we do from here, what we have done and the road that we're headed down. And then hopefully we can have some discussion on that notion. We're talking, and coming in, everybody understood we were talking about an academic, industry, and government collaboration, and the question is, where do we go from here? It's all well and good for us to get together once a year to talk about it and to say these wonderful things, but progress on data collection, on modeling, on visioning, on policy development, on research isn't going to happen on its own. It requires some coordination, and it requires some momentum. The proposition is that a collaborative institute focused on the study of resource recovery and waste management issues will significantly improve policymaking, regulatory oversight, and corporate decision support, thereby increasing both the quality and quantity of business opportunities and enhancing shareholder value. I don't know that I heard anything today to sort of contradict this notion that getting academics and industry and government working in a more coordinated, collaborative way will not result in better decisions and better policymaking. In fact, I think everybody sort of embraced the challenge that the work they do will actually improve where we're headed. This slide is here just because I think it belongs to Chris Ahoyka at York University, but it's one directional, despite the fact that it's a circle. It only points in one direction, that we have resources, the human beings grab those resources, we turn them into waste, and they sit there instead of somehow bringing it back into the resource sector. And so it seemed to me to sort of demonstrate in a very black and white way the challenge that we're up against, and the challenge I think we're all here to try to fix. The proposition of an institute, why a collaborative institute, the idea that it would save money. The research that you want to do would be done on pennies on the dollar. Nobody would be spending $100 in order to get research done that will help move the industry. Matching, monitoring, nurturing academic industry expertise on an ongoing basis will increase efficiencies. We won't have two people studying the same thing at the same time for the same reasons. In fact, we can get those folks together working on the same projects for the same reasons, all headed in the same direction. Avoid duplication. When we did this, the CPIA commissioned a study a few years ago on academic capacity, and it's actually longer. The number of academics who were involved in waste-related research is actually much longer than we saw first thing this morning. But I met a professor at Waterloo and a professor at Guelph studying the very same thing, and they didn't even know the other person existed, never mind that they were working on the same material. So we'd avoid duplication. Business planning would improve, decision-making would improve. If we can get to a point where data is actually collected and held together, you would have all that, not just the contacts on academics, but the research and the data that they collect would be in one sort of place. The proposition being that a web portal, as opposed to bricks and mortar, would solve that challenge. It would accelerate approvals, improve your internal knowledge base, and improve government decision-making. The idea being to expand stakeholder knowledge with best practices and data collection, turn ideas into action through public-private partnerships. Public-private, that's what everybody here is interested in. And from that, there would be new business opportunities, and that would ideally drive sustainable growth, because somebody said it today, we're all talking about the same thing, we're just not coordinating the conversation that we're having, and the proposition here is that we would, and then of course that in turn would result in improved public understanding. There are a few models. Marco Castaldi's group at City College in New York is one example. The Perimeter Institute here in Waterloo. And when you break down the number of industries that have institutes, there are polymers and computers and automotive and manufacturing and agriculture. They all have a public-private body that actually studies industry-related issues, and yet waste, as we see here, has a cohort of people who are interested in it, but they don't do it. And so, again, the proposition is that these folks, everybody in the room, come together and work towards this. Now, this operates out of a physical plant. I don't know that's necessary. That's something that can be figured out as we go along. The Environmental Research Education Foundation in the United States sort of solves or addresses the same thing. It was created because there was recognition that the waste industry wasn't doing research, wasn't doing enough of it, and wasn't collaborating. So at least there, what they've done is to pool research dollars and actually apply those to research areas that are required. And the SWANA Applied Research Foundation does much the same thing. It's interesting to note that the Environmental Research and Education Foundation isn't affiliated with a trade association, so it's another step of independence removed, whereas the SWANA Applied Research Foundation is in fact an association-affiliated model. So in terms of vision and where ideally this is headed, and it's going to be up to you to decide whether or not this model will work. This is sort of an org chart. What's in red has been done. It's in play. This workshop today, by the auspices of the CPIA and the University of Waterloo and the support of Walker Environmental Group, you've got a workshop. The low carbon campus study, again, Walker Environmental sponsored that. The things that are in yellow have sort of been, we've started to flesh those things out. In terms of outreach on the left to the lower half, by virtue of trying to pull this workshop together, we've started to have the conversation with the groups in yellow. We haven't done a lot of media because there's not a real substantive story here. And there are other sectors that have to be brought in, forestry, mining, manufacturing, those sorts of things, at some point down the road. There's no... one of the things we do need, and we haven't got, a website and a web portal where you can access the information. The website, I'm thinking more for outreach in terms of other stakeholder groups, but the web portal is a place where that research would reside. And so the research program is in yellow, meaning we've kind of started down that road. Red is, again, a project that's underway, and the blue are things that are out there that interest people. There's bio-waste, there's thermal treatment, there's industrial waste, there's paper recycling. All of those things are certainly subject matters. Organizationally, actually I'll cover the top left in the next slide, and the top right, actually, this is where I'll go now. So that's one thing about what it looks like in an ideal world, if in fact that's where a group wants to go. But the next steps to make that happen, to actually turn this group into a functional group, into a group that actually begins talking to each other, not one-to-one, but as a group, academics and industry and government talking to each other. It's going to take some effort, and it's going to take some coordination. So the workshop's done. What it requires, I think, in terms of a first step, is a working group. It's going to need folks who have an interest in pulling this together to sit at a table. I'm not suggesting everybody in the room do it. I am suggesting that half a dozen people, 10 people, probably tops, sit down at a table and work through the details on what it's going to take to pull something like this together. Communications planning, research plan, a technology plan, to avoid building a bricks and mortar place, building a website that's interactive. I mean, everybody defaults to that position. Having on one side academics and their expertise, on the other side industry with their needs, and have government try to inform it in terms of the challenges they're facing, and then match those people up in very real ways, in substantive ways, and monitor those relationships and make sure those relationships become functional and workable, and produce material. To get there, though, that working group, obviously there's a business plan required. The capacity report is now, I think it's 4 years old. There's some additions, some nice additions to it that were presented this morning by Yvonne of Virginia. And there is a very long list, a much longer list of academics who are studying waste issues. There's a need, if something like this works, governance reports, operating protocols, some kind of body to direct it and create independence. So this is, if we turn this into something that isn't just a once-a-year workshop about, hey, what are you doing this year? And, we should actually talk about getting together, but this turns into an organization that is producing real live things to do, things that move the industry in all branches of the industry, then we have to move. I'll put it to you this way. This won't happen on its own. And unless we have folks step up, this is where we'll be 12 months from now. And we'll still be looking at a Waste Diversion Act or an ICI Management Act or a whatever that won't be informed. It'll be informed individually by industry and won't be informed by in-depth research, high-level research. So if the notion is to let it do itself, then I suppose we can all go home. The proposition I put to you now is, are you prepared to step up and we'll eat the elephant one bite at a time. Nobody has to buy into the whole idea, but the idea of taking a next step, investing in a working group that then prepares a business plan that can be shared with the other folks who are interested, and try to grow this idea into something that's bigger and strategic and workable. So with that, I'm going to open the floor. We'll start with Marco. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to make a comment that I took some notes over today, and I heard a few things that may be issues in an institution that gets a lot of diverse thoughts and people and competitive entities together. One is IP. Another one is being current in the research that's going on. Another one is in the accuracy and the availability of the data. These were some of the ones that had come through. And what I can say is from the organization that I'm part of, we have multiple industry partners, and some of them are landfill people, some of them are recycle people, some of them are waste to energy combustion people, thermal conversion, and composting. And then we also have agencies like ACC and consulting companies as well. The IP is an issue, and that, in my mind, is really just based around, of course, you could generate agreements and frameworks, but it's based around trust. And that, just needs to be understood and sort of professional courtesy. But what I can say is one of the biggest things that I've learned over the years, I've worked in industry before coming to academia for 10 years, and it's the industry that is really doing it. It's the industry that's really doing forward things, finding solutions to problems, being opportunistic, being creative. And one of the biggest things that I think an institution that combines the academics with that is it keeps the academics current and it keeps the creative thinking going. So it's really that input from industry and different technologies that are being developed, different thought processes that gets everybody current. And then, of course, in terms of data, this is a big issue. But in the United States, if you are government funded, you have to make your data fully available. And so for the National Science Foundation or for a municipality or a state, if you get those funds, that data is basically the Freedom of Information Act. Anybody can just write to you and say, please give me the data. Obviously, sponsored projects by industry, that is an agreement that usually is set up very differently, and of course that data is owned, at least from our organization, is owned by the industry, but that information gets out again through presentations and peer-reviewed papers. So I think that kind of information isn't so difficult to get a hold of. And importantly, as Jürgen say and John say, and I heard others, is the students that then kind of get informed in this regard, that also gets the information out as well. So I think, I've seen really a win-win situation from an organization that really has all of the right stakeholders and competitive people involved to keep things moving forward.
Okay, we've had all day, all day. And the extent to which, recognizing there's a need to put research and policy together, that's one thing, but I can guarantee you the government folks are going to walk out of the room and go, whew. The notion of, Darren. Yeah, absolutely.
Come around up front. The general framework that you've laid out up front, up top, I think makes sense from a macro perspective. I think the concept of a working group to really break out what's been discussed here today on a larger scale, dial that down a little bit, get to some of the core issues, determine the level of interest and support. And I'm a firm believer in I guess, baby steps and small wins in terms of not biting off something too big that can't be chewed. So I like the idea of a working group walking out of here today, and I'm willing to be the first one at the table.
Okay, that's great.
I hope someone will join me. The pressure's on. It's going to be a lonely day.
Sure, from the academic point of view, I can see the merit, and definitely we are advocate of that, and definitely I am on the board.
Okay.
Yes, Ted Komisky. I'm Mayor of Ingersoll and Deputy Warden of Oxford County, and right now working with Darren Fry over landfill potential for our area. I tell you, it's been a phenomenal learning experience over the last 2 years, discovering I suppose I never paid that much attention to garbage before, but I'll tell you, it's been in my nightmares over the last while. I would love to be part of this if I could in any way, shape, or form, because it's the knowledge has to be out there, and if the knowledge can't be out there if it isn't investigated and understood. And I think that the more we understand in Canada about waste, I think the better our statistics are going to look at down the road on what we're doing with it. We bury our garbage right now. We also bury our heads in it because if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. And I think there's so many things we have to understand about the dangers of all aspects of our waste. And I think that an institute along this line would certainly enlighten and certainly bring forward to the community if it's open, if that information is out there and it's sent out there and discoveries are put out there for us to learn and it's sent out across this country. I think it'd be phenomenally advantageous. I'd like to be part of it if at all possible.
Okay, appreciate that.
I'll just quickly add that I'm happy to throw my hat in the ring, Tom Davis, and if we're trying to fill in blue boxes, I'll do the education and training and communications role there and fill in wherever else.
Yeah, I think Darren hit on a good point, and we hadn't talked about this in advance. I mean, this is sort of like you said, a macro level. Don't be scared by the boxes. The boxes are there as a discussion point. I am sure that 2 months from now or 2 days from now, they'll look completely different. I think the idea, and I certainly appreciate the participation, the idea that we have some folks at the table who are prepared to break out some of the issues, and certainly the discussion that we had today. So don't get intimidated too much by the boxes, although, having some help on, those blue boxes to turn them into yellow boxes, and what we really want to do is turn the yellows into reds, this is something that's, and it ain't free, folks, which I'm sure is keeping those many folks quiet. But none of this is. Nothing is free, and moving the policy agenda in the absence of this kind of effective voice. I think, Marco can speak to the success they've had in terms of informing policy, but thank you. Yeah, Kristen.
I do think it's worthwhile a try. I do think it's important to understand, and I don't think I can wrap my head around it right now. Everybody can, taking the approach what you were saying, going in small steps. But I do think it's important that all three levels of organization, as this workshop is about, are at the table, and not one overarching. It shouldn't be a meeting of researchers or of industry participants. It should be a joint meeting, and see what's possible. So from a municipal's perspective, we do a lot of these things as the city, and we would be interested in participating further, considering there's fair representation, and everybody needs to get something out of it. I agree.
Absolutely.
I understand that, but I think that's to be determined, and even if it's not quite clear at this moment.
I think that today's discussions have been very productive as well, and I'm happy to participate in further discussions. My big worry is I'm not sure when I'm going to find time to do this, but I think when you're advancing new ideas, you have to make the time for some of these things. So I don't think we can lose from continuing the conversations and what it looks like at the end of the day. So thank you for inviting me here today, and I look forward to further discussions.
That's great. Good. So we got 2 municipal folks, and we got 2 academic folks, and we've got 2 private sector folks, both of whom have invested everything in getting us to this point. Anybody prepared to, I feel like an auctioneer now. Who's prepared to help these guys out, put you where you want to be? I mean, that's what it comes down to. We've got 2 organizations here who've invested in moving everybody forward. Now, if this is not something that is of any interest, I get that too. So if that's the case, let's hear it. But to the extent that this is going to benefit everybody in the industry, the notion again is that if everybody contributes a small amount, then everybody benefits to a big amount. But Frank, you want to say something?
I guess Marco knows my speeches are usually laced with more comments, but whatever. As an academic, I'm happy to join and be a part of this. I guess I've been looking at it from the climate change perspective, but Canada isn't an entity. Like we are, somebody said it just a minute ago, a disparate group of provinces that tend to work together if we like each other. So I'm noticing this, and that will affect this discussion in the most obvious way to me is emissions from electricity generation. Canada is very different province to province, and that will affect how the research goes, because if you try something in Quebec where the unit emissions are much lower, then it'll be different from trying it in Alberta where you've got coal and oil sands. So that's something I would put in. I mean, I'm happy to be a part of this, but I would add to that, you might want to have some sort of east-west, heaven forbid I use that terminology, representation. The other thing is we all bring different things, right? So I think part of the reticence maybe of academia is we're usually writing people for money. So, you know, that's usually what we do. We write grants and we ask for money, and we don't get them, and then we write more. So how does this all work into this thing? Because we're all going to bring different things. Marco mentioned IP is an issue. Credibility is academics' stock, right? That's what we bring. So how do we work all these things in is what I'm thinking about, and I want to say, and I'm happy to be a part of it to contribute, but and there's no but there, but
There's a but.
another one. Yeah, it's a default, so that's all my thoughts are, is it's a great idea, and like you said, I think there's only one box there, and that's the working group one.
Yeah.
And how do we move that forward when each group is going to bring a very different thing and a very different goal, right? So.
If that's a question, I think people come with, you know, Marco mentioned trust, right? You know, you come to the table with trust, appreciating that. I don't think it's one thing. I think that when you end up on both the outreach side and the research side, the number of those boxes is endless. It's not unmanageable. And at some point you have to start saying, oh, we can't do that, can't do that, can't do that. And they obviously have to be prioritized, but it's certainly not up to me to prioritize. Nor, you know, this is just a point of discussion. It's not up to me to tell you what it looks like either. You know, my job is kind of to try to get you here and to see if we can't get you to the next step and then the next step and the next step. So I think those things end up being endless. And I think it takes a bit of trust for people to sit at the table. And for those who really do have an interest, who have a solid waste master management plan in front of a general public to better understand, you know, where, you know, what opportunities and resources are out there and will benefit from that conversation. So,
Hey, Jack.
absolutely.
Let me just add, because Frank, you bring up a good point that everybody brings something different. And I also heard something here today where somebody said you need to make small accomplishments or small achievements. I think you said this, right? Yeah. Baby steps like this. Our organization started because there were two people very well versed in thermal conversion, in combustion, myself and Themelis. And we actually started with this concept in mind of the hierarchy, and we looked across, and what were we able to contribute? It was the combustion expertise, the high temperature expertise. We started in waste to energy. WTERT is the Waste to Energy Research Technology Council. But if you look across over the 12 years that we've been doing it, what we now do, there's composting, there's recycling, there's life cycle assessment. In that study that I showed, we brought in the health risk assessment aspect. That's not me, that's not Themelis, that's the colleagues and collaborators that came in along the way. I think they came in along the way because we had successes in the thermal area, in the waste energy area, in the sense that we provided, you know, unassailable information and data, and it was available. And so I think, you know, this working group maybe starts with the contributors that then tackle something and move it forward, and it positively feeds back if it goes well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know which group I belong now, but with, as I said, 20 years of government experience, and I'm private consultant in the waste management area, including the toxic waste management. And I think this idea, the collaborative idea between industry, government, and academicians is a very good idea. And if we can make it work, it will definitely produce the results with minimal amount of investment without duplication. So I welcome this idea. As a supporter of this idea, I am willing to, I don't know again which group I will belong to, maybe the industry sector, And I'm willing to participate in this kind of concept, and I'm willing to invest my time as a consultant, okay? So if that helps.
That's good. I mean, small steps.
Hi there. I'm just speaking to the matter of small steps, John, and the fact that if you look at what's on the screen, you know, the big picture, it's quite complex in terms of the partners involved, the research initiatives, the need that's out there, which means that in the early days, it's not always possible to find completely common ground on all issues and all matters. And maybe those baby steps, those initial organizational changes, the initial focus, if it's based on areas of common ground, where there may be not a philosophical difference from one party to the next, is likely going to be your greatest potential success, right? The initial get-go, showing those initial successes, need to focus on those areas of common ground where everybody consistently has something as a priority, and you maybe avoid some of the areas where, frankly, to be quite blunt, there can be areas of difference of opinion. And I'm thinking of an LCA analysis, for example, looking at different models. Some models out there, and I'm not going to name names, are obviously influenced by the opinions of the developer. I'm not saying anybody in this room, but there are some out there. So there are areas where you have to be careful because you can have a distinct difference of opinion that can have an effect on outcome. But there are areas of common ground. Like certainly the collaboration on collecting and analyzing basic data set so we actually understand the waste stream would be an area I think that there would be no disparity of opinion on that at all. The only area I wanted to flag, and I was talking to one of the researchers earlier about their research, there are also areas of research where it's actually difficult to find alternate sources of funding because, to be quite frank, the broader benefit for industry on taking action on that item is maybe not there at all. Specifically, if you're looking at key waste avoidance techniques, where it's not about redesign for the environment, it's about fundamental public behavior changes, or the segment that benefits from that is small, or maybe it's just the municipal sector that benefits from it. So there are areas like that where it'll be interesting to see how to sustain and push those initiatives when some of the other drivers behind it aren't necessarily there from an industry or other perspective. And I know that sometimes that makes it harder to source funding if you're looking for academic grants because there may not be an actual specific product or outcome that is geared to the available sources. So I'm wondering whether or not there's a role for this organization in being active in those areas because there is no other area or incentive or party out there who can actually drive the bus when it comes to certain activities like that.
I'm inclined to agree with you, and I think the first thing, if I had only given you a box that said working group, you would have said, what are you talking about? So I erred on the side of confusion, which is not unusual. It's also important that there is a whole raft of organizational stuff that happened before we got to the red box that is the workshop. And that organizational stuff has been going on for the better part of 2 years to get us to this point. So this is the stuff that has to be done going forward now that we have everybody in the room, as opposed to all the things that have already been done. There are already red boxes that are filled out. And navigating those common areas, I'm of two minds, and I mean, my mind on this is neither here nor there because it's up to you folks to figure out where you want it to be. On the one hand, to pick and choose and the areas of common ground makes a lot of sense, as long as you can find academics, government, and industry folks who are prepared to collaborate on issues that can even agree that those are common areas. The other side of that is that nobody's paying 100% for this. Everybody's paying a small portion of this, right? So everybody's sort of sharing in the pain. And that also means that the agenda can be quite broad. And I think and certainly layman's observation is that one of the things holding back this industry is in fact what you just raised. It's not in my interest, so I'm not going to pursue it. You know, somebody else will benefit, and yeah, of course, they have to invest in that, but the fact is that's how governments co-opt industry. Okay, we'll deal with them on this, and them on this, and them on this, and there's no who said it today? Somebody said, you know, there's nothing stronger than a united voice. You know, that you're not going to get your little piece today, I don't think is the answer to the bigger question about where are we headed and where do we want to land. I think where that is that we've all come together with a united voice and made sure that whatever this thing turns out to be, if it in fact, maybe it just turns out to be another one of these workshops next year, there's nothing wrong with that either, but that it reflects everybody's interests. I had two rather they weren't nasty, they were very polite, but very determined complaints. There's not enough on industrial waste. Well, okay, there's only so much room in the day and we're well past schedule, so you know, you try to find the subjects that make sense, that'll interest the most number of people and get people engaged. So there's always going to be things missing from this and always things we have to add, but you know, I take your point and you're bang on. You're exactly right, but I think there is an opportunity there to find that common ground, but that also represents a challenge. If that's all you do is find common ground, guess what? We're going to be no further ahead 2 years from now than we are today. The industry is too fragmented, and policymakers, government, we'll say government, but the politics of that is it's too easy to co-opt the players in the industry, and that's why we're where we're at. Oh, right, okay, yes.
Would give you the initial, basically, product to show the value of moving forward with the organization.
Yeah, that's a nuance that actually is important to recognize, and I apologize for not appreciating that. No, that's right. Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't step forward. So I represent directly one of those yellow boxes and indirectly probably 3 or 4. So I work for the Ontario Centres of Excellence. So we are a funding organization, but we also facilitate industry partnerships with academia, and we're funded by the Ministry of Research and Innovation. So we have a bird's eye view of what's going on in the province across all sectors, academia. So we connect the dots. So I would welcome the opportunity to be part of that kind of working group, just from a bird's eye view, seeing what's going on in the province, but helping academia partner with academia, industry partner with industry, and then industry, more importantly, from our point of view, is partner with the academic institutions. So I'd welcome the opportunity.
Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Hi, John.
Yeah.
There's 2 elephants missing from the room today, and I'm not sure why, and we probably tried to get a hold of them, but the first one is Environment Canada, and the second one is the Canadian Federation of Municipalities. They have, and especially the Canadian Federation of Municipalities, because the municipalities are the ones that really want access to this type of information. And they're missing from this equation, and I think it certainly would be beholden to try to go after them to help put this in place. Because I think, and there's some people in the room that have probably been involved in the solid waste management field for decades. There's an awful lot of information that's out there. It is fragmented. And in this day and age in Canada, with our science libraries going by the way of the dodo bird, there's a limited window of opportunity to collect that material and put it back into some sort of consolidated library that provides a reference base for the rest of us to draw on, because there's no point in reinventing the wheel. And there's a tremendous amount of work that Environment Canada did, a tremendous amount, especially between, I'd say, 1985 and year 2000. And that is quickly going away. We need to be able to consolidate that, and I think that there's probably the nucleus of this, and maybe a stepping stone for the next part of this, is to provide that base, which you're talking about in terms of sharing the information, is get that nucleus in place, and an institute would certainly be, or some repository for that information, and a web portal is certainly probably the key component to starting things. And I'm just sort of throwing that out as an idea because, like I said, there's that window of opportunity, and it's probably closing pretty quickly. So part of this working group, and if you want my help, I'd be happy to help out. But I think we do have to approach the federal government, at least, the provinces, to a certain extent. And certainly I would think, let's focus on the Canadian Federation of Municipalities, because they have probably the biggest, or the most to gain from this whole process, because it provides them with at least a resource base that the municipalities can take advantage of. Because they're the ones that are actually empowered to deal with the solid waste management issues on a day-to-day basis. They're the ones that are actually in control of it, so.
And one thing I would like to mention before the closing remarks, I have seen the curiosity when it comes to this project. Our organization, WISE, Waterloo Institute for Sustainable Energy, is actually working on a grant, ORFRE, and you can ask up to $4 million from the provincial government when it comes to clean tech technology. So if we have enough industry partners and we have the government support, we can certainly apply for that grant. Back to you.
Okay, thank you. So on my behalf, certainly thank you very much all for coming and participating. And I hope at some point we can move things forward in a progressive way.
So thank you to those who are still in the room. And again, a thank you to the panelists who joined us today. We appreciate the information you brought, the perspectives you brought. For those who are in the room, and in particular those who have committed interest to exploring the next steps with us, thank you. You know, I think Janine has left or is leaving. You know, but to the point of let's figure out an area of common ground, and as Marco pointed out, you know, look for the wins. We can grow momentum. You know, we have to start somewhere, and certainly we know that there's a lot of gaps, and obviously there's a lot of interest because we're all sitting in this room, you know, minutes past our deadline. So I look forward to seeing what the next steps are. I think as, you know, a bit of administrative, we'll put together a summary report. We'll follow up with folks who are here and people who couldn't join us but expressed interest, and look to build that working group and figure out our path forward. So thank you all. I'll turn it over to Bill.
Thank you. And so on the behalf of University of Waterloo and Waterloo Institute for Sustainable Energy, I'd like to thank all the panelists for their contributions today, the audience members for your useful input and comments and discussion, those that have volunteered to help us out with next steps in figuring out what we're going to do in terms of some kind of institute. I think it was a very useful day. As an academic, most people think that we like to teach, but actually we do it because we like to learn, and I learned a lot today from lots of people, so that was very good from my point of view. I think a few themes have evolved from the discussions or have been confirmed from things that we have discussed before. The need for data, some kind of way of capturing the data and holding it in a way that is useful and accessible for many people or stakeholders. The role for social science in collaborative projects, I think, came out loud and clear, which as an engineering professor, we don't always think too much about that aspect. So that's a very useful observation. And I think it's quite clear from the things John put together on his slides that there's a wide variety of technical challenges and opportunities. But there's also a lot of common ground, or at least some common ground where we can get started. So that's a very good thing. So my impression then, and thanks to John for sort of facilitating this discussion and tying it all up, is that we do have some common ground to move forward, and we've got some people to work with, and we will start on that road over the coming weeks and months, and look forward to being in contact with all of you and seeing what develops. So thank you again, and enjoy your, have a safe trip home, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.